He thought he married one Apache girl, but ended up with 3 sisters. John had always lived a quiet life. His ranch sat on the edge of a wide, sun-baked valley in Arizona, far from the bustling towns and crowded streets. The land stretched for miles, dotted with sparse trees, rugged hills, and the occasional herd of cattle grazing lazily under the bright sun. Life was simple, predictable, and sometimes lonely. John had grown used to this routine. He would rise with the sun, tend to the cattle, repair fences, and make sure the ranch ran smoothly. There were days when he hardly spoke to anyone, and he had grown accustomed to the comforting silence of his home. Yet, despite the peace, a small part of him longed for companionship, someone to share stories with in the quiet evenings, or laugh with over a meal by the fire. One afternoon, John decided to make a trip to the trading post several miles away. It was a routine errand, but he felt a subtle excitement in the air, a feeling that something unusual might happen. The trading post was a lively place, full of people from nearby settlements, travelers, and even a few Apache families who came to trade goods. The smell of fresh bread, leather, and campfire smoke mingled in the air, creating a strange yet comforting atmosphere. As John stepped inside, he noticed a young Apache woman arranging bundles of herbs and small handmade items for sale. Her hair shone in the sunlight that streamed through the doorway, and her eyes carried a quiet intelligence that seemed to see right through him. Her name was Ayanna. She moved with grace and confidence, speaking softly but clearly to the people who approached her stall. John found himself lingering nearby, pretending to look at the items while actually stealing glances at her. There was something different about her, something that stirred feelings he had not felt in years. He noticed the way she smiled politely but warmly at everyone, the careful way she handled each bundle as if it were precious. John felt an unusual pull toward her, a curiosity he could not ignore. Over the next few weeks, John returned to the trading post more often. He would find reasons to stop by Ayanna's stall, asking about her herbs, the designs of the small items she sold, or simply making small talk. At first, she responded politely but cautiously, as if she were unsure of his intentions. John, however, was patient. He knew the value of patience, having spent years caring for animals that required constant attention and gentle guidance. Slowly, Ayanna began to respond more openly. She shared stories of her family, her daily life, and the traditions of her people. John listened with genuine interest, learning not only about her world but also about the challenges and joys she faced. Their meetings gradually became the highlight of John's days. He found himself thinking about her long after leaving the trading post, wondering what she was doing, hoping she was safe, and imagining life with her by his side. Ayanna, in turn, seemed to grow comfortable with him. Her smiles became more frequent, her laughter more relaxed, and there were moments when their eyes met in quiet understanding. Though they came from very different worlds, a connection began to form between them, a bond based on respect, curiosity, and a shared desire for companionship. One cool autumn morning, John finally found the courage to speak openly about his feelings. As the sun rose over the distant hills, casting long shadows across the trading post, he told Ayanna that he wished to spend his life with her. He spoke honestly, with a mixture of nervousness and hope. Ayanna listened quietly, her expression thoughtful. After a long pause, she nodded and agreed to the idea of marriage, explaining that she would need to discuss it with her family first. John felt a mixture of relief and excitement. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future that included love, laughter, and partnership. A few days later, John received a message from Ayanna's family. They would come to his ranch to formalize the arrangement. John was thrilled, picturing a simple ceremony with him and Ayanna, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the Arizona landscape. He spent the days leading up to their arrival, preparing the ranch, polishing the furniture, mending fences, and cooking extra meals. His anticipation grew with every passing hour. The morning they arrived, John rode out to meet them, expecting to see a small group, perhaps Ayanna with a few relatives. Instead, he was greeted by a surprising sight. Alongside Ayan stood two other young women, her sisters, Nayeli and Kiona. They were close in age, but each had a distinct personality that shone through immediately. Nayeli was quiet and gentle, with careful, observant eyes. Kiana, on the other hand, was lively and curious, her energy almost sparkling as she looked around the ranch with interest. John felt a sudden wave of confusion. This was not what he had expected. He had thought he was marrying one woman, and now he faced the responsibility of three. Ayanna explained patiently that in their culture, it was not unusual for sisters to be entrusted together, especially if their family felt it would strengthen ties and provide mutual support. John listened, trying to absorb the unexpected truth. His mind raced with questions and doubts. How would he manage three women? How would life on the ranch change? Could he care for them all equally? Despite the uncertainty, there was something in Ayanna's calm demeanor and steady gaze that reassured him. He realized that he would need to open his heart and mind to this new reality, no matter how surprising it was. The first days were a mix of excitement and adjustment. John introduced the sisters to the ranch, showing them the routines, the animals, and the tasks that would occupy their days. Ayanna took the lead, helping her sisters understand the work and making the transition smoother. Nayeli followed quietly, observing everything carefully, while Kiona brought laughter and energy, asking questions and exploring every corner. John found himself both challenged and fascinated by their presence. Life would no longer be predictable, but he felt a strange sense of anticipation for the journey ahead. As the sun set on the first evening, John sat on the porch, watching the sisters gather around the fire. Their laughter mingled with the crackling of the flames, and for a moment he allowed himself to imagine the future. Not just with Ayanna, but with all three sisters. He realized that life, like the land around him, was full of unexpected twists, surprises, and moments that could change everything. Though he had begun his journey thinking it would be simple, he now understood that sometimes the most remarkable experiences come when we embrace the unexpected. John felt a mixture of nervousness, hope, and curiosity. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and adjustments to make. Yet, as he looked at Ayanna, Nayeli, and Kiona, he also saw the potential for a unique and beautiful family. It was a new beginning, one that promised growth, learning, and love in forms he had never imagined. In that quiet Arizona valley, under the vast sky, John took the first step toward a life that would forever be different and far richer than he had ever dreamed. John woke early the next morning, the sun barely peeking over the distant hills. The ranch was quiet, except for the soft sounds of the animals stirring and the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees. Yet the quiet felt different now. It was no longer just his quiet. The presence of Ayanna and her sisters had changed the rhythm of the place. Even the air seemed charged with a new energy, one that promised both challenges and discoveries. John knew that today, like every day going forward, would be a day of learning, not only about ranch life, but about the three women who had suddenly become his family. After breakfast, John decided to spend time with the sisters individually, hoping to understand them better. He started with Ayanna. She was calm and attentive, moving around the ranch with a natural ease. She knew how to handle the animals, how to organize tasks, and how to maintain the order of the household. John admired her confidence and her quiet strength. It was clear she had grown up learning responsibility, and it showed in everything she did. Next, John turned his attention to Nayeli, the middle sister. Nayeli was quiet, her movements careful and deliberate. She asked few questions but observed everything with sharp eyes. John noticed the way she noticed small details, like whether the gates were secure or whether the animals seemed healthy. While Ayana led and guided, Nayeli seemed to quietly evaluate and prepare to help in her own way. John realized that her gentleness was a strength, not a weakness, and that over time she would become a steady and reliable part of the household. Kiona, the youngest sister, was the most challenging for John to understand at first. She was lively, curious, and full of questions. She ran from one part of the ranch to another, exploring everything, touching everything, and asking why things were done a certain way. At first, John felt frustrated. He worried she might accidentally harm herself or disrupt the delicate balance of the ranch. But soon he began to see her energy as a gift. Kiona brought life and laughter to the ranch. Her curiosity sparked conversations, and her enthusiasm reminded John of the joy in simple moments that he had long forgotten. As the day progressed, John began to notice how the three sisters interacted with one another.
Oh, wow.
Ayana naturally took on a leadership role, gently guiding her sisters and offering advice without demanding obedience. Nayeli followed her lead but also offered quiet suggestions when needed, showing that she was thoughtful and capable in her own way. Kiona, though energetic and sometimes unpredictable, respected the guidance of her sisters while also contributing her own ideas. John realized that the three sisters worked as a team, each balancing the others, each bringing something unique to the household. It was a dynamic he had never experienced before, and it fascinated him. By midday, John had started showing the sisters around the ranch in more detail. He explained the routines for feeding the animals, collecting water, and preparing meals. Ayana absorbed the information quickly, asking questions when necessary. Nayeli listened attentively, making mental notes of every step. Kiona, meanwhile, made the process more lively, asking questions with wide-eyed curiosity, sometimes interrupting with excitement or surprise at small details. John laughed at her reactions, realizing that her enthusiasm was infectious. Even simple tasks, like gathering eggs from the chicken coop, became moments of shared amusement and bonding. During lunch, the sisters shared stories from their past. Ayana spoke of her childhood, of lessons learned from her parents, and of the responsibilities she had taken on at a young age. Nayeli spoke softly of her love for quiet tasks, for weaving and cooking, and the satisfaction she found in careful work. Kiona shared her dreams, her wishes to see the world beyond their village, and her fascination with everything new. John listened intently, fascinated by their experiences and perspectives. He realized that marrying one sister had unexpectedly introduced him to three rich, complex lives, each with its own joys, struggles, and wisdom. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, John noticed the challenge of adapting to this new family. There were moments of tension already, small misunderstandings, differences in opinions, and the occasional clash of personalities. Kiona, in her enthusiasm, sometimes disrupted tasks, while Nayeli's quiet approach could seem slow to John when he was used to efficiency. Ayana acted as a bridge, patiently mediating and guiding both her sisters and John. It became clear to John that patience, understanding, and flexibility would be key to managing life with the three sisters. Dear Reverend W., despite the challenges, John also began to see the advantages. With three women, each bringing unique skills and perspectives, the ranch ran more smoothly than it ever had. Ayana's leadership ensured that tasks were done correctly. Nayeli's careful observations caught mistakes before they became problems. Kiona's energy brought life and excitement, preventing the routine from becoming dull or monotonous. Together they formed a balance, complementing one another in ways John could not have imagined. The initial shock of their arrival began to fade, replaced by admiration and a growing sense of partnership. As the day drew to a close, John led the sisters to a small hill overlooking the ranch. From there they could see the expanse of land he cared for, the grazing cattle, the distant hills, and the winding paths that marked the boundaries of his property. He pointed out landmarks, told stories of the ranch's history, and shared memories of his life alone. The sisters listened attentively, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply taking in the view. In that moment, John realized that this was more than just a ranch. It was a home, and it was now a shared home. He felt a growing sense of connection to the sisters, a quiet reassurance that together they could face the days ahead.
Evening settled over the ranch with a soft glow.
The sisters worked together to prepare dinner, laughing and sharing tasks. John watched them from the porch, feeling a mixture of awe, gratitude, and anticipation. Life with one woman would have been simpler, perhaps, but life with three sisters promised depth, richness, and unexpected joys. John understood that the journey ahead would require patience, understanding, and flexibility, but he also felt a quiet excitement at the possibilities. Before retiring for the night, John spoke with Ayanna privately. He shared his thoughts, his worries, and his hopes. Ayanna listened patiently, offering reassurance and guidance. She reminded him that their journey together was about learning, adapting, and supporting one another. With her calm presence, John felt more confident that they could manage life as a unique and united family. Nayeli and Kiona, he realized, would play essential roles in shaping this household, bringing harmony, energy, and careful attention that would balance his own efforts. That night, as John lay in his small bedroom, he reflected on the events of the day. The ranch was no longer a solitary place. It had become a home full of life, laughter, and learning. The presence of Ayanna, Nayeli, and Kiana had changed everything, introducing both challenges and blessings. John understood that the path ahead would not always be easy. There would be moments of frustration, doubt, and adjustment. Yet he also felt a quiet sense of wonder at the richness of life he was beginning to experience. In the stillness of the night, John realized a simple truth. Life was unpredictable. The quiet ranch he had once cherished had transformed into a lively, vibrant household. What had begun as a simple proposal to marry one woman had blossomed into a unique family filled with strength, wisdom, energy, and love. Though he had not expected this, he now understood that the unexpected often brought the most valuable lessons. And as he drifted into sleep, John felt a sense of anticipation for the days ahead, knowing that with patience, understanding, and care, this unusual beginning could grow into a life full of joy, partnership, and unexpected blessings. Days turned into weeks, and life on the ranch began to settle into a rhythm, though it was a rhythm unlike anything John had ever experienced. The presence of Ayanna and her sisters, Nayeli and Kiona, brought energy, warmth, and a sense of companionship that John had never known in his solitary life. Each day presented new lessons, new surprises, and new moments of joy. John quickly realized that adapting to life with three sisters was a journey of patience, understanding, and learning, and he embraced it with an open heart. The mornings started early, as they always did, with the sun peeking over the hills and casting long golden rays across the fields. John would wake first, as usual, but now he was greeted by the sounds of the sisters preparing for the day. Ayanna would already be in the kitchen, grinding corn or arranging herbs for the day. Nayeli moved quietly, ensuring everything was in order, feeding the animals with careful attention. Kiona, ever curious and energetic, would rush about asking questions, exploring corners of the ranch, or sometimes playfully chasing the chickens as they clucked and flapped in surprise. The mornings were busy, lively, and sometimes chaotic. But John found that he enjoyed the new energy. He often smiled as he watched them work, realizing that each sister brought a unique gift to the household. Ayana's presence was steady and calm, a guiding force that kept the household organized. She had a natural ability to manage tasks and people at the same time, balancing work with conversation and care. John admired her patience and her understanding of both the ranch and the people in it. She would quietly remind him of small details he had overlooked, or offer advice on how to handle the animals during the hot afternoon hours. Her wisdom and experience were a constant support, and John began to trust her guidance more and more. Nayeli, while quieter, contributed in ways that were just as important. She had a keen eye for detail, noticing small problems before they became serious. She could sense when a fence needed repair, when an animal was unwell, or when the water supply was running low. Her careful, methodical approach balanced the energy of Kiona and complemented Ayana's leadership. John began to appreciate Nayeli's quiet strength, realizing that her thoughtful ways often kept the ranch running smoothly behind the scenes. Kiona was the spark that brought laughter and lightness to the day. Her curiosity was endless, and she seemed fascinated by every aspect of ranch life. She asked questions constantly, sometimes about work, sometimes about nature, and sometimes about things that seemed trivial at first but often led to useful discoveries. She explored the land, climbed trees, watched the animals closely, and often came back with new ideas or observations. At first, John had worried about her energy, thinking it might be distracting or overwhelming. But over time, he saw how her spirit inspired him and the others to look at things in fresh ways. Even simple chores became enjoyable when Kiona's enthusiasm was part of the day. Working alongside the sisters, John began to notice how the household was slowly forming into a true partnership. No longer was he the lone rancher making every decision alone. Now, he had 3 thoughtful, capable women whose advice, energy, and guidance shaped the ranch as much as his own hands did. They were learning from him, and he was learning from them. He realized that life was no longer about just completing tasks. It was about working together, supporting each other, and finding joy in shared experiences. But life was not without its challenges. Sometimes tensions arose between the sisters, or between John and the sisters. Kiana's energy, though delightful, occasionally led to accidents or frustration. Nayeli's quiet, deliberate pace sometimes clashed with John's sense of urgency. Ayana often had to mediate, gently guiding both sides toward understanding. John realized that managing relationships was as important as managing the ranch. It required patience, empathy, and careful attention to each person's needs and feelings. Mistakes and misunderstandings were inevitable, but they also provided opportunities for learning and growth. One afternoon, a storm rolled in from the west. Dark clouds covered the sky, and a sudden wind whipped through the valley, rattling the trees and shaking the fences. John and the sisters had to work quickly to secure the animals, tie down loose equipment, and protect the crops. The storm tested their ability to work together, and it also revealed the strength of their growing bond. Ayana coordinated the efforts calmly. Nayeli ensured that every detail was attended to, and Kiona's energy kept everyone moving efficiently, even as the wind tried to slow them down. By the time the storm passed, the ranch was safe, and John realized that the sisters were not just helpers. They were true partners, capable and reliable, each contributing in her own way. As the weeks passed, John began to notice subtle changes in himself as well. He had become more patient, more observant, and more open to perspectives he had never considered before. Life with the sisters forced him to slow down, to communicate, and to appreciate the smaller moments that he had once overlooked. He found joy in simple things, watching Kiona laugh as a calf stumbled playfully, listening to Nayeli hum quietly while weaving baskets, or sharing a quiet conversation with Ayana at the end of a long day. Life had become richer, fuller, and more meaningful. Evenings were a time of reflection and bonding. After the work was done, the sisters would gather by the fire while John prepared dinner or sat nearby, watching the flames dance. Stories were shared about the day's successes and mistakes, about childhood memories, about dreams and hopes for the future. John listened, laughed, and sometimes offered advice, but mostly he absorbed the warmth of their presence. He realized that the ranch was no longer just a place of work. It had become a home filled with love, learning, and connection. John also began to understand the depth of Apache traditions through the sisters. They shared stories of their family, their customs, and their beliefs. He learned about their ways of respecting nature, caring for the land, and supporting one another. The sisters taught him that strength could come in many forms, not only in physical work, but in patience, thoughtfulness, and the ability to nurture relationships. John began to see that life on the ranch was not just about survival. It was about harmony, understanding, and living with purpose. Slowly but surely, John's initial apprehension began to fade. What had seemed like an overwhelming responsibility, caring for 3 sisters instead of one, had transformed into an opportunity for growth, learning, and connection. He came to understand that each sister brought something essential to his life. Ayana's wisdom kept him grounded. Nayeli's careful attention prevented problems before they arose. Kiona's enthusiasm reminded him to find joy in every day. Together they created a household stronger, more vibrant, and more balanced than he could have imagined. By the end of the 3rd week, John felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life on the ranch was no longer solitary or predictable. It was full of challenges, yes, but also full of laughter, learning, and unexpected joy. The sisters had become an inseparable part of his life, and he knew that their presence had transformed not only the ranch, but also himself. He began to imagine the future, not as a solitary man, but as a husband, a partner, and a part of a family unlike any he had ever known. That night, as the fire crackled and the stars appeared in the clear Arizona sky, John sat quietly with the sisters. He thought about the journey that had brought them together and the road that lay ahead. He understood that life would not always be easy, but he felt confident that together they could face any challenge. The ranch, the animals, the work, and the daily routines had all become part of a shared life, one filled with love, respect, and partnership. And for the first time in a long while, John felt a sense of peace and excitement for what the future might hold. He realized that life with Ayana, Nayeli, and Kiona was teaching him a powerful lesson. That family, connection, and understanding were far more important than simplicity or predictability. The days were full, the work was hard, and the responsibilities were many, but the rewards he knew would be even greater. With patience, kindness, and an open heart, John was learning to thrive in a household that was unconventional, challenging, and yet more beautiful than he could have imagined. Life on the ranch had grown more complex, yet richer with each passing day. John had settled into a routine with Ayana, Nayeli, and Kiona, but he now realized that running a household with 3 sisters required more than just patience. It required understanding, communication, and compromise. There were mornings when everything ran smoothly, and evenings when tensions flared over small misunderstandings. Yet, John found that each challenge offered a chance to learn and grow, not just as a rancher, but as a husband and partner. One particular morning, John noticed that Kiona seemed unusually quiet. Normally full of energy and questions, she moved slowly from task to task, her bright eyes shadowed with worry. John approached her gently, asking if something was wrong. At first she hesitated, unsure how to express herself. Then, slowly, she explained that she felt overwhelmed by the chores and responsibilities, worried she might not be able to help as much as her sisters. John listened carefully, understanding that her feelings were genuine and important. He reassured her, explaining that everyone had different strengths and that together they could manage anything. Kiona's face brightened, and a small smile returned. John realized that moments like these were important reminders that he needed to be attentive to their emotions as well as their actions. Meanwhile, Naeli sometimes struggled with feeling overlooked. Her quiet, thoughtful nature meant she did not always speak up, and John had to make a conscious effort to recognize her contributions. One afternoon, while repairing the fence, he paused to thank her for noticing a loose post before it became a serious problem. Naeli's face lit up with a shy smile, and John understood how important it was to acknowledge each sister individually, to show them that their efforts were valued. These small gestures, he learned, strengthened trust and deepened their connection. Life also brought practical challenges. The ranch was vast, and managing it required careful planning. Weather could change unexpectedly, animals could fall ill, and the work often seemed endless. John had to coordinate with the sisters constantly, ensuring everyone knew their roles and responsibilities. Ayana, with her steady guidance, became an invaluable partner, helping to organize the day efficiently while also teaching the others techniques for managing tasks. John began to see that her leadership was not controlling, but supportive. She knew when to step in and when to let him make decisions, creating a balance that kept the household running smoothly. Despite these challenges, there were moments of unexpected joy that reminded John why this life was so rewarding. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, the sisters worked together to prepare a simple meal. Their laughter filled the kitchen, echoing through the small house. Kiona recounted stories of her adventures exploring the fields. Naeli quietly hummed a tune while kneading dough, and Ayana offered gentle guidance as they moved through each step. John watched them, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Life was busy, sometimes frustrating, but moments like this made every effort worthwhile. Occasionally, disagreements arose, testing their growing bond. Kiona's adventurous nature sometimes clashed with Naeli's careful approach, and John had to mediate conflicts without taking sides. One afternoon, a disagreement erupted over how to repair a section of fence. Kiona wanted to try a new method she had imagined, while Naeli preferred the tried-and-true way they had always used. John listened to both, weighing the options carefully. Eventually, he encouraged them to combine ideas, resulting in a solution that worked even better than either had imagined. The experience taught him that disagreements were not obstacles, but opportunities for creativity, teamwork, and deeper understanding. Over time, John noticed how the sisters supported one another. Ayana often encouraged Kiona to focus her energy constructively, while Naeli would quietly assist Ayana in planning tasks, ensuring nothing was overlooked. Even when they disagreed, they found ways to respect each other's strengths and perspectives. John marveled at their ability to work together as a team, realizing that their unity was one of the greatest strengths of the household. He understood that this was more than just 3 women helping him manage a ranch. It was a partnership, a family built on respect, trust, and love. John also began to see changes in himself. He had become more patient, more observant, and more appreciative of small details. He listened more, reflected more, and recognized that leadership was not just about giving orders, it was about understanding, guiding, and supporting others. The challenges of living with three sisters had transformed him, making him more empathetic and thoughtful. Even the mundane tasks of ranch life, feeding animals, mending fences, or gathering water, took on new meaning when shared with people he cared about deeply. The seasons changed, bringing new tasks and challenges. Summers were hot, requiring careful attention to the animals and crops. Winters were harsh, demanding preparation and resourcefulness. John relied on the sisters' skills and knowledge more than ever. Ayana's experience ensured that they planned efficiently. Nayeli's careful observations prevented problems, and Kiona's energy and enthusiasm kept morale high. Together, they navigated each season successfully, their bond growing stronger with every challenge faced and every task accomplished. One day, a group of neighbors stopped by, curious about the unusual household. They had heard that John, who had once lived alone, now had 3 Apache sisters living with him. The neighbors were skeptical, some even whispering doubts about whether such an arrangement could work. John welcomed them warmly, introducing the sisters and showing how they worked together to run the ranch. By the end of the visit, the neighbors were impressed. They saw not just a man and 3 women living together, but a household full of cooperation, respect, and mutual support. John realized that living authentically, even if unconventional, was more important than conforming to others' expectations. As the months passed, John and the sisters began to celebrate small traditions together. They shared stories of their past, taught each other skills, and learned new ways to approach daily life. John introduced them to some of the routines he had developed during his years alone, while the sisters taught him about Apache customs, foods, and crafts. Life became a blend of cultures, experiences, and perspectives, creating a rich tapestry of shared knowledge and affection. John came to understand that the strength of a family did not come from uniformity, but from the way individuals supported and complemented each other. Evenings became moments of reflection and connection. After the work was done, the sisters would gather around the fire, sharing laughter, stories, and plans for the future. John sometimes joined them quietly, observing, listening, and occasionally adding his own thoughts. The bond between them had grown into something profound, beyond friendship, beyond simple partnership. They were a family, united not by convention, but by trust, care, and shared experiences. John realized that he had learned some of the most important lessons of his life through this unexpected arrangement: patience, empathy, cooperation, and the ability to embrace life's surprises. Despite the challenges, John felt a deep sense of fulfillment. What had begun as an unexpected turn of events, marrying one woman and ending up with 3 sisters, had transformed into a life richer than he could have imagined. The sisters were no longer simply helpers on the ranch. They were partners, teachers, and friends. Together, they had built a household filled with laughter, learning, and love. John understood that the journey was ongoing, that there would still be difficulties and adjustments, but he felt confident in their ability to face anything together. Looking out over the ranch one evening, John felt a quiet pride. The land, the animals, and the household were all thriving. Ayana, Nayeli, and Kiona moved about the property with ease and purpose, each contributing in her own unique way. John realized that the true success of the ranch was not measured in crops or cattle alone, but in the harmony, respect, and love shared among those who lived and worked there. This realization filled him with a sense of peace, knowing that the unexpected blessings of his life, the sisters' presence, their guidance, and their partnership, had made his world fuller, brighter, and more meaningful than he had ever dreamed. John understood that life was rarely predictable. He had come to the ranch expecting solitude and routine, only to find himself at the center of a vibrant, dynamic household. Yet, in the midst of challenges and surprises, he had discovered something far more valuable: a family built on respect, understanding, and mutual care. The sisters had not only transformed his daily life, but had also reshaped his heart, teaching him lessons about patience, love, and the beauty of shared life that he would carry forever. As night fell over the ranch, the stars emerging one by one in the vast desert sky, John sat quietly, reflecting on the journey so far. The road ahead would still hold surprises, joys, and difficulties, but he felt ready. With Ayanna, Nayeli, and Kiona by his side, he had learned that life's unexpected twists often brought the greatest rewards. Together, they had faced trials, embraced challenges, and grown stronger. John knew that whatever came next, they would face it as a united family, bound not by expectation, but by love, respect, and shared purpose. Years had passed since John had first met Ayanna and her sisters. The once quiet ranch, which had stretched across the sun-baked valley with only his own footsteps to mark the days, had transformed into a lively, thriving household, filled with laughter, work, and shared purpose. Life had not been easy, and there had been countless challenges along the way. Yet John now realized that the rewards had been far greater than he had ever imagined. The three sisters, Ayanna, Nayeli, and Kiona, were no longer just companions or helpers. They were family, partners, and friends in every sense of the word. Each day began with the familiar sounds of life on the ranch. The chickens clucked, the cows lowed, and the wind whispered across the dry grass. Ayanna was usually the first to rise, moving gracefully through the house to prepare breakfast and organize the day's tasks. Nayeli followed, quietly attending to details, ensuring the animals were fed, the fences secure, and the water supply sufficient. Kiona, bursting with energy even at the early hour, would rush around enthusiastically, helping where she could while laughing at small mishaps or playful animals. John had long since stopped worrying about how he would manage life with three sisters. Instead, he found joy in the rhythm of their shared work, each of them bringing balance, skill, and personality to the household. Over time, John had learned how to navigate the complexities of life with three sisters. He understood the importance of patience, empathy, and communication. He knew that each sister had her own strengths, and he had learned to respect and trust them in their roles. Ayanna's wisdom guided the household. Nayeli's careful observation ensured smooth operation, and Kiona's energy and enthusiasm brought joy and vitality. Together they had created a harmonious environment in which work and life flowed together, and John had come to see that this unexpected arrangement was a blessing he could never have anticipated. The sisters had also grown alongside John. Ayanna continued to be a guiding presence, offering advice, organizing the daily routines, and ensuring that everyone's needs were met. Nayeli had grown more confident in her abilities, often taking initiative in solving problems and finding solutions. Kiona, while still playful and curious, had learned when to channel her energy productively, contributing in meaningful ways that strengthened the household. John watched them and marveled at how far they had all come together. They had become a team, a family that functioned not because it had to, but because each person cared deeply for the others. Life on the ranch was not without its difficulties, however. There were seasons when the weather tested their resilience: harsh summers with scorching heat, cold winters that required careful preparation, and sudden storms that threatened the animals and crops. John relied heavily on the sisters during these times. Ayanna's calm and measured guidance ensured that they remained organized. Nayeli's attention to detail prevented costly mistakes, and Kiona's energy kept everyone moving quickly and efficiently. Even when challenges arose, John had learned that together they could face anything. He no longer feared difficulties because he knew that they had the strength, resourcefulness, and unity to overcome them. The ranch itself had grown as well. With the sisters' help, John had expanded the fields, repaired fences, and improved the animal enclosures. Their home, once simple and modest, had become a warm, inviting place filled with the fruits of their labor. The garden flourished under the sisters' care, producing fresh vegetables, herbs, and fruits. The kitchen was always alive with activity, whether preparing meals, preserving food for the winter, or experimenting with new recipes. Even the smallest corners of the ranch were touched by the sisters' care, their presence transforming it from a simple working farm into a true home. Beyond the practical aspects of ranch life, John had come to cherish the deep emotional connections that had formed. Each evening, after the work was done and the sun had dipped behind the hills, they would gather by the fire. The warmth of the flames matched the warmth of their conversations. Stories were shared, plans were made, and laughter filled the air. John listened to the sisters' reflections on their childhood, their dreams and their experiences, and in return he shared his own memories and thoughts. These moments became sacred, a time when the bond between them deepened, reminding John that the true value of life was in these shared connections, not just the work or accomplishments of the day. John also reflected on how much he had grown. Life with the three sisters had taught him patience, empathy, and the importance of listening. He had learned to value cooperation over control, understanding over judgment, and love over expectation. He realized that this family, formed in a way he had never anticipated, had reshaped not only his daily life, but his heart and mind as well. The lessons he had learned from Ayana, Nayeli, and Kiona went far beyond ranch work. They were lessons about human connection, respect, and the power of unity. The sisters, too, had learned from John. They had adopted some of his methods, his routines, and his ways of approaching challenges. But more importantly, they had learned that they could thrive in this new environment, that their voices, opinions, and abilities mattered, and that they were valued as equal partners. The initial uncertainty, hesitation, and surprise that had marked their first days together had faded completely. What remained was trust, respect, and a deep bond that could not be broken by time or circumstance. The ranch also became a place of joy for the broader community. Neighbors who had once been skeptical of John's unusual household came to see the success and harmony of their lives.
Daring madam.
They observed the sisters' skill, dedication, and cooperation, and they respected the family's unity. The children of the community in particular were drawn to the lively household, learning from the sisters' example and sometimes helping with chores or games. The ranch had become more than a home. It had become a symbol of what could be achieved through understanding, patience, and cooperation. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in brilliant hues of red and gold, John looked over the ranch and reflected on the journey they had taken. He remembered the first day when he thought he would marry one woman and was suddenly faced with three sisters. The shock, the uncertainty, and the apprehension of those early days now seemed like distant memories. What had started as an unexpected challenge had transformed into a life of love, partnership, and joy. The sisters had not only changed his home, they had changed him. John realized that life was unpredictable, and sometimes the greatest blessings came in forms he had never imagined. Marrying one woman and ending up with three sisters had seemed overwhelming at first, but it had brought richness, learning, and love that he could never have achieved alone. Together, they had built a life filled with harmony, laughter, and care. They had faced challenges, adapted to change, and supported one another through every season. The ranch, the animals, the tasks, and the routines were all part of a shared journey. a life lived fully and meaningfully. As the stars appeared in the night sky, sparkling over the vast Arizona desert, John sat quietly, reflecting on the lessons of his life. He understood that the bond he shared with Iana, Nayeli, and Kiona was unique and precious. It was a family built not by convention but by respect, care, and mutual support. It was a household that had taught him the value of patience, the importance of empathy, and the joy of shared work and laughter. John felt gratitude for every challenge, every moment of learning, and every day spent with the sisters who had become his family. In the quiet of the night, John realized that the story of how he married one woman but ended up with 3 sisters was more than just an unusual tale. It was a story of growth, connection, and unexpected blessings. It was proof that life, even when surprising or challenging, could bring profound happiness if approached with openness and care. He understood that the future would hold more work, more challenges, and more surprises, but he was no longer afraid. Together with Iana, Nayeli, and Kiona, he knew they could face anything, creating a life of love, laughter, and harmony that would endure for years to come. John smiled quietly, feeling a sense of peace that he had never known in his solitary years. The ranch was alive with movement, warmth, and laughter. The sisters were there, each contributing their unique talents and personalities, and he was finally home in a way he had never imagined possible. Life had surprised him, challenged him, and taught him, but most importantly, it had blessed him with a family unlike any other. In the vast desert, under the endless sky, John realized that he was exactly where he was meant to be.